Well, hello there, everyone. We're trying to figure out last-minute bugs here. So welcome to an evening with the authors at Benchmark Books. We haven't done too many of these via Zoom, so we're used to doing these in person, and we're longing for the day when we can meet in person again in our store and have the authors right with us, and we can enjoy your presence and your friendship in person like we've done for so many years. Really grateful to those who are participating with us tonight. I've got 3 of the contributors to Why I Stay, Volume 2. And Robert Rees is the editor of that volume and also the one that preceded it, which is, strangely enough, Volume 1. We are just concentrating tonight on the second volume, which was just published a short time ago by Signature Books. There are a number of those who have done chapters.
Curt, let me interrupt you a minute. Somebody's got something on that's a sound that's clicking. So if all of those people who are tuned in would check to make sure there's not some mysterious sound coming from their direction, that would be helpful.
We're doing the best we can on our end with the computer, and my son Chris is our technician, and so there may be a few little bugs, but yeah, if we could ask everyone to make sure you're muted on your own computers or devices, that would really help. But anyway, I'm glad that Bob can be with us tonight because, like I said, he has edited both these volumes and has also contributed, and I'll be offering a short introduction for each of those who are with us tonight. But Bob is in California, and another of our participants tonight, I'm happy to say, is Carolyn Pearson, who's in Walnut Creek, California. I guess they're Californiaites. I'm a Utahite, and we have a Illinoisite. We have all manner of ites tonight with us. But Carolyn Pearson will be talking to us after Bob, who's going to start this off, and I will tell a little bit about each of them. And then, fortunately, we have with us in-house Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, who has come all the way from the Chicago area, is in town in our 100+ degree town where the weather is horrible. All week, over 100 degrees here. I don't know what it's like where all of you are, but it's pretty warm. So we don't have a lot of, it sounds like a church meeting, a lot of announcements, but we don't currently have another author event planned for right now, but we will please watch your computer or your devices for announcements that you get from us. Make sure that you're on our mailing list. And just to let you know that the proceedings from tonight and from all of our past author events are on our website, benchmarkbooks.com. And then after a little while, this one will be available as well, so that if you want to revisit it or if you want to let people know about this gathering, if you want to call it that, tonight, they can go to our website at any time. Once we get it, put up, they can watch that and all the other ones that we've had. We recently met in Park City with the Mormon History Association. Probably some of you were there and or know about that. There's been a lot of talk lately about the the documentary Murder Among the Mormons about the Mark Hoffman case, and that was the lead off Mormon History Association, a panel discussion on that. And we did have Jared Hess and Tyler Measom, who co-directed that documentary, which has been getting a record number of views on Netflix. It was the #1 viewed program on any streaming platform in March and I think part of April, maybe. Millions and millions of views, and it's an amazing production. I would recommend it. They wish they had had 6 nights to do it, but they only had 3, and so they had to cram a lot in there. But the Mark Hoffman case just hasn't ever gone away, and unfortunately, I was part of that. I tell people that I would much rather have read about it than been involved in it. But anyway, it is part of our history, and it is fascinating, though tragic. I'm not going to take time to talk about new titles that are coming out. And as I said, I don't really have any other events right now that we can tell you about. So just stay tuned and keep watching for the announcements that we send out. But if you're not on our mailing list, please make sure you let us know, because we'd like you to know about new titles that come out in Mormon studies, and as well as events like this and other things that are of interest when we have sales and so on. I'm really glad that we're still open during this terrible period of our history with this COVID pandemic, and I'm glad that things are getting better. I hope all of you are well and aren't suffering from that. With that, I'd like to just briefly introduce our participants tonight. As I mentioned, Robert Rees is the editor of both of these volumes of Why I Stay. I was looking up his CV, and it is literally several pages long, and we don't have time for me to even highlight a lot of what Bob has there and what he's accomplished, but I'll just mention a few facts. He is Director of Mormon Studies and visiting professor at Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. He has a PhD in literature and philosophy from the University of Wisconsin, and has taught or been involved in administration at universities such as UCLA, UC Santa Cruz, UC Berkeley. He has written or edited several books, including both those volumes of Why I Stay, Proving Contraries, a collection of writings in honor of Eugene England, and A Reader's Book of Mormon. And he's published his own poetry. He's a poet, as well as a writer and commentator. He has written many articles for, I assume, dozens of publications, but including Sunstone and Dialogue. He is a frequent speaker at many different academic and other venues, including the annual Sunstone Symposium, which is coming up toward the end of next month. So I'd invite you to find out about that. I think they're going to have to adapt as well this year because of COVID and so on, but check into the Sunstone Symposium. In our local papers, I assume that they appear elsewhere as well. I frequently see op-ed pieces by Bob. So he's a thinker, he's a writer, he's a reader, and I've known him for many years. He's also very involved in humanitarian and other charitable causes. He is co-founder and current vice president of the 𝑊ℎ𝑦 Children's Foundation. I admire Bob very much. I've known him, like I said, for many years, and have only had really good experiences with him. A fine human being. I've also known Carolyn Pearson for many years, and frankly have been in awe of her. her accomplishments, her writing, her poetry, and her nonfiction that she has written and published for decades. The latest is, or one of the latest anyway, is Finding Mother God, Poems to Heal the World, published by Gibbs Smith. She, as you know, also wrote The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. She's well known for her early memoir, Goodbye, I Love You. And I don't remember if I told her this story, but one of the few times I've ever lent one of my books, because I've been in the book business a long time and I know what happens to books that get lent out. But I lent it to a friend who took it to Lake Powell, first edition that Carolyn had inscribed to me personally. It meant a lot to me. I reluctantly let this friend take it. Well, it looked like it dropped in the lake. She let somebody else read it, and it came back in terrible condition. And I vowed at that point I would never lend one of my books again. But anyway, Carolyn, I'm sorry it happened to your book, but it's a treasure in my library anyway. She is also a screenwriter and playwright. I went to see one of her early plays, The Order is Love, when I was at BYU, and it was about the United Order, a delightful production. She's done many others as well. She is known and revered for her activism on issues, especially regarding women and LGBTQ people. So we're really happy to have Carolyn with us via Zoom. As I said, I'm really pleased to have with us here in our store, Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. She received a bachelor's degree from BYU and a master's and PhD in counseling psychology from Boston College. Her dissertation was on LDS women and sexual agency. She currently runs a counseling and coaching practice, helping LDS couples and individuals achieve better relationship with themselves and intimate partners. She also teaches online courses and workshops to members of the church on topics of sexuality and related areas in marriage and individual development. You've probably seen her or heard her in recent podcasts. She's been asked for her commentary on a lot of things that have been happening, but I'm really pleased to have her with us all the way from the Chicago area. Oh, I don't think she came just to do this, but she's here. That's what counts. So I'm going to now turn the time over to Bob, and if he wants to comment about the book itself as a whole or his editing of it, that would be fine. But also mention some things that he thinks are important for us to hear about why we stay, and then we'll each give our little take on our chapters in the book and why we stay. Thanks for being with us tonight. Bob, take it away.
Thank you, Curt, and thank all of you who have joined this Zoomcast. It's such wonderful to see faces and names of people that I have known and loved for many, many years, and who are part of this community of which we've given a good deal of our heart and our mind and our spirit. The most popular session of Sunstone for many years, for decades, is the session called Why I Stay. And I've been attending those sessions and look forward to attending the ones in the summer symposium, which is coming up at the end of July. And I think that one of the reasons why that has been the most popular session of Sunstone over the years is because almost everyone in the church is affected, either directly or indirectly, by the question of staying, and almost everyone has someone in their life, it might even be themselves, who has either stayed or not stayed, or has wrestled with the question of, do I stay or not? Over the years, that question has become a much more complicated question as the church and the life of the Spirit has become more complicated and complex and nuanced. And so when I decided a number of years ago, a dozen years or so, to collect these essays and publish them in the first volume of Why I Stay, I was struck by the quality of mind and heart and spirit that went into those essays. That is, the people who wrote essays about why they stayed were people who did not have a casual or indifferent relationship to the church or to Latter-day Saint history or to the idea of what it means to be a Christian in a world that is becoming increasingly secular. And as I listened to those essays and as I read them when they were, some of them published, I decided that it would be a gift to the Latter-day Saint community to have a collection of those. And so that first collection, published in 2011, included wonderful essays by a number of Latter-day Saints who I think each in his or her own right represented what Richard Bushman has called in his essay, Radiant Mormonism. There is a radiance, I think, that we are aware of if we've been in the church for very long, from what we might think of as exemplary Latter-day Saints. And at Graduate Theological Union, where I teach and where the Council of Latter-day Saint Mormon Studies is attempting to create a center, we began a couple of years ago honoring people who, with our annual Radiant Mormonism Award, and we will continue that in this coming fall. That idea of radiance, I think, is something that is, to some degree, indefinable, but nevertheless very palpable. My reasons for thinking about this question, why I stay, go back in my family for 4, possibly 5 generations. My great-great-grandparents were among the Latter-day Saints in Wales who joined the church in those early days, at a time when so many Welsh people joined the church that there was a thought maybe the entire nation will join the Mormon church. There was someone who quipped that, but nevertheless, my great-grandparents, William and Elizabeth Rees, joined the church with their 3 sons, immigrated to the Great Salt Lake in the 1850s, sold their material goods, picked up their roots, and moved to the Great Basin. They were part of that great diaspora that moved to Zion. For reasons that are not really clear to me, my great-grandfather went back to Wales, but my great-grandmother stayed. And as one looks at those 3 sons, one sees the son who stayed in Utah, who was faithful to the church, has a large Latter-day Saint progeny. And I am pleased to call them cousins. That great uncle of mine, Joseph Alexander Rees, became a prominent educator. Though not a polygamist, he married serially when his wives died and ended up with having 24 children. So there's a large Rees clan in Utah, descendant from that family. But my great-grandfather went back to Wales, and when I visited Wales 20 years ago, there were no Latter-day Saints who were descendant of William Sr. and his son and his wife, who went back to Wales. They had a son on the way west whose name was, I think, Joseph Hiram Rees. And but out of that family, there are no descendants. My great-grandfather, who stayed in Utah, became disenchanted with the church. He had what he called a seer stone, which Brigham Young said was a swamp angel. And he got miffed at Brigham and the church and left the church, went to California, ended up in Missouri. He joined the what was then called the Reorganized Church, now the Community of Christ Church, and married a woman, and they had 2 sons whom he named Zenos and Zoram, but neither Zenos nor Zoram ever were Mormons, never joined the church. And so when my father was 12, the Mormon missionaries came through southwestern Utah and baptized my grandmother and my two aunts, but not my father or my grandfather nor my uncle. And so my grandmother Rees was a Latter-day Saint, but 2 months after I was born, she was killed in an avalanche in the mountains of Colorado. And so that ended her influence as a Latter-day Saint in the family. Her two daughters who had been baptized when she was, neither one of them stayed in the church. And my father, who was not baptized, later was converted to the church by a miraculous priesthood blessing in his 20s. And when he returned from the Second World War, he taught me the gospel when I was 10, and I joined the church, and then he later fell away. And so for a period of time, when I was in my teens, I was the only member of our rather large family who stayed active in the church. And so my family has been converted to the church in 4 separate generations, independent of the previous generation. It's an unusual story, but the question of staying, therefore, has been something that has been of great interest to me. And someday I'll write the story of these 3 sons and just their story in relation to the church. But as I collected those essays originally, I was really interested in having people who had thought about this question, who had wrestled with it, who had some who had left the church temporarily and came back, but most of whom simply found very good reasons for staying. In the decade between the publication of that first volume and this second one, which was just published last March, there was a tremendous change in the church. And I write about this in my introduction. And part of that is related to the fact that up until just after the turn to the 21st century, the church controlled its narrative almost completely. With the advent of the internet, with social media, with so many other things, with the flowering of Latter-day Saint scholarship, with more and more people looking at our history, there became the question of who is the Latter-day Saint and what is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and what is its history, became a much more open and complex issue. And so in that interim, the question of staying, as I said, has become more complex. I gave a lecture fireside in Salt Lake last year or 2 years ago, a large group of people, and I said, I'm just going to do a little informal survey. I want you to tell me how many of you, children your grandparents had. They did that and averaged 4. And I said, how many of them stayed in the church? Well, the majority of them did, at least 3/4. I said, then ask how many children did your parents have? And it averaged about 2.5. And how many of them have stayed in the church? And it was about half. And then I asked them about their own families. And with each generation, the number of people, percentage of people who stayed, and this was a very informal survey, the number of people who stayed was decreasing. And this kind of matched Jana Rees's very interesting book called The Next Mormons, in which she found that an increasing number of people are wrestling with the question of whether or not they're going to stay faithful to what we know as the Restoration. The question of staying is also complex in relation to this volume that was just published, because when I started gathering essays for it about 9 years ago, a number of people who stayed and who participated in the Sunstone Symposium said they wanted to stay, ended up not staying, even though they submitted their essays, and I was considering them for this volume and had edited, and then, I would suppose half a dozen of them have elected not to stay. And so that in and of itself is an indication of the complexity of this. I would gather that if I ask for a raise of hands among this group of people as to whether or not someone they know in their immediate family has stayed or not stayed, that probably everyone or nearly everyone would have examples of people who have chosen not to stay. And I'm aware of how difficult that can be, both for the person who leaves and the people who stay when they've left, and the kind of pain over that. But I think that the other thing that I would say, these essays in this in the present volume, wonderful array of articulate, reasoned, heartfelt, spiritual expressions of what it means to be a continuing disciple of Christ in this particular manifestation of Christ's kingdom. My guess, based on what we see of the younger generation, based on what we see of issues that continue to trouble Latter-day Saints, the more we see the proliferation of media outlets and blogs and websites devoted to questions of staying, I think the more people will be wrestling with this. So I invite you to read these essays. The variety is really quite wonderful. It really shows that discipleship is not a cookie cutter kind of thing, and questions of staying are run across a spectrum of issues, of personalities, of relationships with the church. One of the things that comes out of it is both the seriousness of this, but also a wonderful celebration of what it means to be committed to this church that has a longer name. The new volume is The Challenges of Discipleship for Contemporary Latter-day Saints. The first volume was Contemporary Mormons. We are still, as a church, wrestling with terminology at Graduate Theological Union. We've decided to call it the Council for Latter-day Saints / Mormon Studies, because we feel that the work that we're about centers on the church, but it also centers on this larger culture, which is not defined exclusively by the church, but which includes it. And that culture is the Mormon culture with its distinctive peculiarities. I would say, as I get ready to turn this over to my dear friend, Carol Lynn, that one of the great blessings of my life is to teach Latter-day Saint Mormon studies at Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. My students are from across the spectrum of religious traditions, Jews and Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims, and a variety of Christian denominations, from Wiccans to Catholics to Anglicans to evangelicals. And for that opportunity to have dialogue with other believers, which I encourage all of us to do, and which is really part of this volume. This volume is a dialogue among believers of different kinds of Latter-day Saints. But one of the things that I found in my teaching, I teach at the Institute of Religion, which means my classes have a mixture of Latter-day Saint students at Berkeley and other universities and students from Graduate Theological Union. At the last course I taught before COVID, we had a group. I always bring a group of returned Latter-day Saint missionaries in to talk to the graduate theological students, and they just, they all questions are open on the table, and so they talk to these young people about their missions. And we had returned missionaries, I believe, from Russia, from South America, from a number of different places. And after the class was over, after this session, one of my graduate theological students, a Swedenborgian, when the class was broken up, and most people had left. He turned to Gloria and me and he said, "How do you produce such people? I find it remarkable that these young people go out into the world and give up 2 years of their life to teach something that they will believe in. I see that it shines through them." Well, that is a pleasure. And I also said to him, you know, your faith shines through you. And I am blessed by my Catholic and Anglican and Baptist and other students whose devotion to Christ or to Jehovah or to whomever deepens my own understanding and my own faith. So I hope that these essays will do that for you as you open your hearts and minds to reading them. And one of those really sterling essays is by Carolyn Pearson, who talks about the reason she stays, and it has to do with love, which is always the best reason for staying. Carolyn.
Bob, thank you so very, very much, Bob. Everything you've been saying here is so fascinating to me. I'm taking it this way and this way, but what? And Jennifer, I am so pleased to be here with you. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say, even though I read your essay already in here. And Curt, I honor you for all of the good work that you have so consistently done. And particularly this evening, this exact book. I believe it will be really very useful, I hope, to a lot of people. The essay that Bob put in this book for us was originally a talk that I gave at that Sunstone session that was referenced, where a number of people tell why they stay. And the fact of the matter is that I get this question all the time. Why do you stay? It comes to me as a Facebook question, it comes to me by email, comes to me in person when I'm out and about. And I'm grateful to have this blueprint that I already had to think through, that is still true. Everything that I have in this essay is still very functional in my life. The title that Bob gave to my little chapter here is Where God Is, a Widening View. And this begins with the title poem from one of my very early books of poetry called A Widening View. When my eye first opened behind the viewfinder, there in close-up was the flower, the only possible flower. Who turned the lens for the pullback? Life, I guess. What? Another flower and another? A field alive with flowers? The only possible field? Loss, delight. Borders are forever gone. Life is at the lens. The view goes on and on. And golly, it's been decades since I wrote that little piece. And that is really the journey that I have had with the church. When I was born into this mortal world, I was very deeply rooted in Mormondom. All of my ancestors on both sides went back to the important journeys that brought people here. The various wagon trains and the Mormon Battalion and the good ship Brooklyn. So I studied and I loved learning about all these people and their dedication. And so I knew that I was one of them. I was one of these important Mormon people, a Mormon girl who was going to do great things inside this spectacularly good, and only true organization. And as I expressed here, when the lens pulled back for this little flower, the lens of life also pulled back for me and my situation in our still wonderful church. But I had to see it very differently. I saw all of these extraordinarily interesting and beautiful and meaningful ideas and organizations. And I was no longer able to hold that little vision of this one little flower being the only true flower in this bed of this variety of beauty. And then as a little bit of maturity came in, as this simple little poem expresses, nevertheless, never mind that there are all of these other wonderful flowers, wonderful organizations and ideas. That does not nullify the possibility of the beauty and the possible, the focus and the possible ongoing commitment to the particular arena, the particular church that I was born into. And so being able to look at it that way, that whatever this term we use of only true, I don't know what to do with that anymore. But I focus on something that is extraordinarily helpful and useful and beautiful. Now, as Bob mentioned, the theme really of this essay of mine here, and the theme of my personal religious experience and evaluation of my religious experience is the word love. And love is really all I know about God. You know, there are a lot of definitions of God, a lot of names for God, but as God has whispered, I am love, that's the one that I grab hold of. And so it is my true belief that wherever we see love, we are seeing God being manifest. And whenever we see non-love, there is no God in that particular place. And I believe with all my heart that in all of our relationships, in our marriages, a straight marriage, a gay marriage, if there is true devotion, kindness, love, that is where God is. And in a marriage, no matter how it's been sealed and whatever, if there is not true love and devotion there, I cannot believe that God is really there, except as God is always present, urging us to do better. So looking at this particular flower that I have devoted myself to, this particular church, the question is, do I see a significant amount of God here? Meaning, do I see a significant amount of love here? And the fact is that I do. I always have, and I do even now. Even when it makes me angry, I acknowledge that I continue to see an overwhelming amount of love within this organization. And as I look around and find places where there is not love, then what I see is an opportunity for me to be able to do something about that, to take that vacancy and create love within it, so that there is more love within our church organization, and therefore more goodness within it, and therefore more godness within it. And I believe that we all have that opportunity. I have had an unusual opportunity just because of events of my life that have happened, that have given me an opportunity, I believe and I know, to create more love in this organization. And I believe if I had not had that opportunity, I would likely not be one who has stayed. But I am constantly buoyed up by the love that I see around me, and my focus on the love that I have been able to participate in magnifying. And anybody who knows me here knows the areas that I have been called to focus on. As was mentioned, well, you know, life brought me this unlooked for, unwanted opportunity. Although, you know, my dear queer husband, Gerald, did say to me very often, Blossom, you know that you and I have been put here to do a project together. I'm sorry it's so painful, but we are here to do a good work. And I've had an opportunity to utilize that and to do some really significant things for our LGBTQ community. And almost every day I receive gratitude from people whose lives have been touched by what Gerald and I together did. You know, I would have never been a writer except this strange gay queer man had decided to publish his wife's poems. Who would do that but a strange queer gay man? But I think it was part of whatever I came here to this earth to do. So I could start bringing in all kinds of examples of how I have found love within this organization that have to do with all the other people who have done their work to create the love there. And Brother Joseph created a lot of love there, as have so many since then. But my particular contribution has been this other opportunity of both receiving the love that comes from being an LDS person and also having the opportunity to make a difference through bringing more love into the situation. Curt mentioned my book, The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. You know, ever since I was pre-high school, I looked at certain things in the church, looked at women's place in the patriarchy, and something in me said something is wrong here. And then as I developed, that was one of the things that I knew I had been given an opportunity and the ability to address, because from everything I was learning, everything I was seeing, everything I was feeling personally as a woman, there was no love in what I was taught about the probability that if I was exceedingly righteous, I would be living in a polygamous situation in the celestial kingdom. I was taught that. That broke my heart. So later on, as I had the capacity to do something about that, I did. And I'm very pleased with that book. Almost, well, 2 days ago, I got another email from a woman saying, Carolyn, thank you so much for that book. I finished it last night, and this morning I can see a path where I can stay in the church, because I thought I was going to have to leave because I could never accept polygamy. But the way you laid things out here, let me understand that I can throw away that and maybe other things, and I can keep my focus and my membership in the church. So thank you for that. So, you know, in this odd kind of way, my little deviations and bringing up some of the unhappiness in our church has created what we're trying to do here, which is to help people, if they choose to, be able to stay in. I want to leave time for questions, and I think maybe I will just end with how I end this little essay. This poem of mine that every 24th of July, I put it back out on Facebook. And again, people say, oh boy, I love that. I needed that. So one of the reasons that I stay is that I don't absolutely 100% stay. Now, I'm so blessed to have had priesthood leaders in the ward, in my stake, who have not only tolerated me, but appreciated me and utilized me. I wish everyone had that opportunity, but I'm grateful that I have had it and that I continue to have it. Just this morning, I had a great interaction with the 3 stake presidency members that we went through Prop 8 together. We went through hell together, and we continue to have a great bond. So I would wish that for everybody. And I'm grateful I can use my part of that to do what I believe I came here to do. So yes, I stay, but I do not stay in concepts that I do not believe in. I do not stay in whatever it is in our church that does not feel godly and loving to me. And I express that in this poem, Pioneers. My people were Mormon pioneers. Is the blood still good? They stood in awe as truth flew by like a dove and dropped a feather in the west. I have searched the skies, and now and then another feather has fallen. I have packed the handcart again, packed it with the precious things and thrown away the rest. I will sing by the fires at night out there on uncharted ground, where I am my own captain of tens, where I blow the bugle, bring myself to morning prayer, map out the miles, and never know when or where or if at all I will finally say, this is the place. I face the plains on a good day for walking. The sun rises and the mist clears. I will be all right. My people were Mormon pioneers. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. And Jennifer, please come in and share your heart and your mind with us.
Okay, I will. 1 second. So, thank you, Bob and Carolyn. It's actually touching for me to listen to both of you. I think where I'll start is just in talking about what, I grew up in Vermont. My parents.
Chris, could you put up the sound a little bit?
Okay, yeah, we're working on that here.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay. So just speak a little bit about, I grew up in a large family of 8. My parents were transplants from Idaho. And so we were a large percentage of, of a very small branch. And so we made up a great deal of the church. And so I grew up very, very immersed in my LDS experience. and faith. We had primary at our house. My parents were very involved in church callings and leadership. You know, I was playing the piano for the primary. I mean, we were very, very involved, and we did all the things that families did in the 70s, like plant large gardens and can. And, you know, it was so much my experience. And so it was, first of all, my people. You know, it was the people that really cared about me because I was far away from extended family. It was church members that were kind of surrogate aunts and uncles and grandparents because we were so far away from biological family. And I was really very much loved and cared for. And so it was absolutely my home. And it was also very much my spiritual home. It's where I learned about a Father in heaven that loved me and that cared about me and that I mattered to no matter what. And it's where I learned the concepts that the truth mattered and that the truth set you free and that what you did mattered and that there was an important purpose in life and that to be in pursuit of what was true and to live as close to it as you could was what God expected of me. And so those were just foundational realities that deeply shaped who I was and what mattered to me. And they were anchors for me during periods of, you know, social insecurity in adolescence and high school, that I could lean on this idea that God loved me and knew me, and that I mattered even if I wasn't known or understood by others. You know, alongside that deep sense of belonging, that spiritual anchoring was also, you know, as Carolyn spoke about, this awareness of women's second-class status in my perception. You know, I was a questioner and a thinker from a young age. I was a student of relationships. I thought a lot about how people thought about things. And I thought a lot about, you know, there was a lot of celebration of marriage, but I witnessed a lot of unhappiness in marriage around me. And in particular, the idea that women sort of folded into men's realities. And so I wanted very much to reconcile. It felt wrong to me. I also had a cousin who was gay, and he was struggling so much to make sense of himself. And the church's stand on it felt wrong to me. And at the time, I preferred the idea that I was wrong than that the church was wrong, because I wanted so much to have the church be right, or I didn't want to be wrong myself. I didn't want to have the struggles I had with theology because it made me feel that I was in some way impaired spiritually. So, you know, I wrestled a lot, very honestly and earnestly, with these things, and I went on a mission as an act of a sacrifice to God, to say that I will study earnestly, I will sacrifice fully, because I want so much to have a testimony and to know what's true, like everybody else seemed to have, that I seemed unable to get in the way that others had. And so at a certain point on my mission, I kind of put all my questions away. I served diligently, I served earnestly. And at a certain point, a friend of mine wrote me and told me that she decided to leave the church, and all the reasons why, and kind of all at once, all my questions were back up, kind of unaddressed. And I went into kind of a full crisis at that point, internally. And so it happened to be Semana Santa in Spain. It was the Holy Week there. And so we were doing very little teaching that week, which was a real grace, actually. And I
Jennifer, would you lean a little bit closer to the microphone so we can hear you? Shakespeare said of a woman she had a voice that was ever soft, gentle, and low, and it's a beautiful thing. But over Zoom,
it's not good. And I think it's also this computer, so I'll try to also just speak loudly.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks for telling me. So I went into kind of a full crisis at that point. I started to fast. I fasted for 48 hours. I was praying constantly and writing in my journal, kind of endlessly writing and trying to parse through and figure out who I really was and what was really true, and would God give me that gift. And on the fourth day, I was out watching the processions, the of Semana Santa, the gilded, figurines. And in that moment, I knew I got what was my answer, which was that, Jennifer, that there are false traditions everywhere, including in this church, and that it's your job to discern between good and evil, between right and wrong, and to align yourself with what is right. And I knew that was the answer, that it wasn't just going to be handed to me as all true, and that I had a moral responsibility to keep pursuing. And I was grateful for an answer, but the answer scared me, because I understood that it would cost me the social validation that I so very much wanted. I didn't want to be someone that was a threat. I didn't want to be someone that would be rejected for not seeing things the same way. I kind of put that answer away for a while because I didn't have enough courage to lean fully into it. But several years later, I knew that's what I needed to do, was to allow myself to discard what wasn't right, what I couldn't come to feel right about, and to embrace what I did feel right about. And I really drew deeply on my spiritual foundation, a sense of a God who loved me, who cared about my pursuit of truth, that pursuing what was right mattered, and really thinking deeply about human relationships, about what constituted goodness, what were true principles to live by, and really seeing that so much of our theology provides for these much deeper truths of eternal progression, of love leading us into truth, that love and relationships matters more than ideology, or that the Sadducees and Pharisees attach themselves to ideas over love as a way to excuse themselves or to elevate themselves from the deeper and harder project of really loving those around us. And so I think that my desire to stay has been both because this is my family, this is my people, these are the people that I love most. I mean, when Bob talked about radiance, I know what he means. The people that I feel most connected to, that speak to me, that have blessed my life, but also those that I want to bless. When I wrote my dissertation on LDS women and sexuality, it was in part because I could see many women suffering, struggling with questions about their sense of value, their sense of identity, permission to be women who are embodied and able to receive pleasure and have goodness in their lives, as opposed to the kind of cultural dictate to sort of debase themselves, to step down in their strength and so on, and how much that impacts marriages and impacts families and impacts well-being. So, my investment in the community has been like, it's Latter-day Saints that I have wanted to be a part of, and also to help enrich our moral conversation, our theological conversation, to appeal to the best parts of our theology. We have such a remarkable theology, and oftentimes we focus on the lesser parts, and we lose the strength and the expansiveness that our theology provides for us. And so it's meant something to me to be able to contribute to that conversation and to have to be privileged enough to be able to help people. I've been very grateful for that. So anyway, I'm very grateful to have been born into this church. I'm very grateful for the foundational truths that it's offered to me. And I hope for us to keep thriving as a people and to keep growing and maturing as a people. We need it, and we have the ability to do it. So thank you.
That's beautiful, Jennifer. Thank you. And now Curt, who is the organizer of this little band of brothers and sisters, we look forward to your comments.
The band of brothers and sisters. If you want to shake people up, start a talk by saying, "Dear sisters and brothers." I really have enjoyed what we've heard so far. And I have to say that I'm very honored to be included in this group. And I realize there are only 4 of us out of the many contributors to this volume, but I feel very privileged to be one of many in this book. I've been telling my own story for a long time, and it's very interesting, to say the least, to see some of it in print. And one thing I don't mention in my chapter, but I have on other occasions, and that is, it might seem like a strange thing to keep one in, but books and the things that are in those books are one of the factors in my own life. I've been, as a child, I was accused of being a bookworm by my friends, and it wasn't meant as a compliment. But I've surrounded myself with books, just ask my wife. But I love what's in them, and I love that there are those in this book that have added to the literature of the Latter-day Saints in one way or another. So, Bob, thanks for putting my essay in there. I do truly feel grateful and privileged. To ask why I stay makes you think, well, are there reasons why you shouldn't, or are you thinking of leaving? And I have never seriously considered leaving, although maybe when I'm in the middle of a really boring meeting or something, I might think of at least leaving for a few minutes, but that's about it. But I have many reasons for staying, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of those. But while I've never considered leaving the church or the community or those who surround us, I know many who have, and I've been in this LDS book business for a really long time, well over 40 years, and I have heard so many stories from people in the church who have felt concerned, to put it lightly, or hurt, even ostracized, and they often feel alone. Excuse me. They feel like they must be the only ones who have doubts, or the only ones who have questions, or look at things a certain way. And in addition to being a bookstore owner, I've felt like I've kind of served in the role of sort of a pastoral role, and I've talked to so many people who have considered leaving, and many who have left. And I feel that we as a people and we as a church are diminished by their absence. And I'm so sorry to see them leave, although I offer no judgment for those who do, because everyone has to make their own choice. And as a good friend of mine said, faith is a decision. And staying is a decision. I have many heroes, and I talk about some of them in my chapter. but one of them was Marion D. Hanks, and he counseled thousands of people to stay inside and lift. And so I've tried to do that, although I often probably leave the heavy lifting to others. I think it's important that, and Carol Lynn really hit it on the head when she talked about love being one of the most important elements of our community and a reason for staying. And I think that every contributor to this book and all of you out there watching, I'm sure feel that as well, that if we didn't have the love that binds us, then there wouldn't be a place for us. And I'm so glad that there is. Like Bob was sharing some of his background and Jennifer just did, I too come from a multi-generational Mormon family. I'm sorry, I still say Mormon and Mormonism. I'm very steeped in that, and we have so many publications going back to the beginning of our church that use those terms. So sorry if if I'm not current on that, but I even have a couple of real life Danites in my history. My great-great-grandfather had some very interesting things to say about those who weren't true to the faith. So probably one of the really big reasons why I should stay is I'm afraid of what Alan Joseph Stout might do to me if I were to ever leave. In my little contribution to this book, I say that I see life through Mormon eyes. But that said, I want to add that I don't see through rose-colored glasses, and my eyes are wide open. I'm very aware of the faults and the frailties and the problems that we have in the church and amongst ourselves. I'm under no illusion that we have perfect leaders or members or people without flaw. And I know a lot of people like to say that the church is perfect, but the people aren't. But the church is also a work in progress. And I think that's very clear from our literature and from what we've seen and heard over the years. Because we are the church. We are the parts of the church. We're the parts of the body that Paul talks about, and we need each other. One part of the body can't say to the other, I don't need you. We need each other. And that's what makes up the church. We are the body, and we are a work in progress. So I'm well aware of the problems that we've had in our past, and there have been some very dark moments. Mountain Meadows Massacre is one. How we've treated certain people in our church, people of color, or people whose there are gender issues, or things that, the LGBTQ community. But we can do better. And I think that we are making progress, although sometimes I feel like sometimes we take a step forward and a couple of steps back, or the steps are baby steps. But I do believe, and I do have hope, that we are moving forward, and that really keeps me going, and that also makes me stay in. And I've studied the gospel, the restored gospel, all my life. I know what's in the literature. I'm always learning, but actually all of my kids have come to me with questions and so on. And one I was talking to a number of years ago, and I asked her if she really thought that there were questions or problems that have been in our past that I wasn't at least aware of. And she admitted that no, probably not. And yet all of us know those things, but we all stay together, this band of brothers and sisters. I just want to say a word about doubt. I know that lately we've been told that maybe doubt is not a good thing, and there certainly can be negative consequences of doubt, but I believe that it's vital to our growth. And there's some wonderful quotes. I just read one in a magazine recently by Goethe that says, in which he said, doubt grows with knowledge. Frederick Buechner, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, had a great quote. He says, if there's no room for doubt, there's no room for me. I know that some are disturbed by doubt and questioning, and they want certitude. And I think the people in this book and so many others don't feel the necessity for certitude. I say in there, well, when I gave this, it started as a talk on why I stay at the Sunstone Symposium, and I said, while many see only in black and white, I see many shades of gray, although not as many as 50. And then I said to those in the audience, they go, bless you if you don't know what I'm referring to. But I think that ambiguity is a part of our lives and a part of our faith, and it's inevitable. And so I may not feel quite the same way about needing to know. I believe that the scriptures are full of the whole idea that faith is what drives us, and it grows, and you feed it and it grows, and then maybe someday there will be a perfect knowledge. But for now, I think we have to live with ambiguity and even doubt. But that does not mean we should be without hope or without faith, for that matter. Sorry, I'm feeling like I'm sermonizing here a little bit. I am a big tent Mormon. I think there's a place for everyone. As I said, I think we're diminished when people leave. I've had many heroes that have helped keep me strong. Some of them have died. They're in our past, such as Juanita Brooks, Hugh B. Brown, Lowell Benyon. There are those around me now who are living, but that I don't want to embarrass by including them. But I hope many of them know who they are, that lift me up and keep me in. I think it's a lifetime effort, and I've tried to devote my life to learning as much as I can and helping others around me do the same. In the chapter, I also, at the very end, say that Mormonism, sorry, I don't know what else we call it, gives me a center of gravity. It is pulling constantly at me, keeping me in its orbit. And I think Bob chose the title for my chapter, My Center of Gravity. I say, along with what Carolyn said about the necessity for love, I don't always like everything about the church. Just it's kind of like family. I don't always like everything my family does, but I always love my family. And I feel the same way about the church, with all of its flaws and with all of our problems. I love the church, and I love the people that are in it, and I'm grateful to be part of it. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say about my little contribution to that. I do want to let all of you know that we appreciate your being with us tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've been uplifted and learned something. I want to mention that since I am a bookseller, I do talk about books, as you may have noticed. We are getting some copies of this book, Why I Stay. I should have grabbed a copy to show you again. Why I Stay 2, signed by as many of the contributors as we can get in here to sign books. So if you would like to purchase one of those that's signed by some of those contributors, after a little while we'll have more of them signed, but we've got a number of those that will be available. Anything else that I need to go over before we?
I want to see any questions.
Yeah, as far as we did have one question. and Chris will tell us, though, I'm sorry to say that only one question was submitted ahead of time, and how was that worded? Chris?
How successful have you been at living your own personal style or brand of Mormonism, i.e. the oft-maligned cafeteria label, perhaps for your own sanity? And what things typically get in the way of this? How do you stave off well-meaning efforts to drag you back into orthodoxy?
Wow, that's quite a question.
So,
You want to check?
yeah, I noticed somebody put in the chat, when will the webinar be available on the website? So maybe people who want to refer friends to this recording will be able to.
Sorry, Bob, to interrupt. It'll be a few days. We just have to get it on there. It'll just take a little time. It won't be terribly long.
And I wanted to say that as part of the Sunstone Symposium, we're doing another Zoom cast that will include 6 other contributors to this volume, including Phil Barlow and Charles Anouay, and some of the other people who contributed. So that will, if you look at what's the Sunstone Symposium for the summer, there will be another opportunity for the contributors to this volume to do that. Let me say a word kind of in response to that question that Chris put out there. And I think that everyone, the interesting thing about faith is that it's very individual, and that everyone who is alive struggles with what it means to have faith and to live faith. And that certainly is true of all of the contributors to this volume, each of whom has his or her own story. I'm aware, looking at the people watching this, that one of the most beautiful essays was one that I was not able to include in the volume because the writer of it felt that the challenge that the church's position on LGBT parents was something she simply could not reconcile with her heart, and I trusted and honored her decision. But in my essay, I quote some of the beautiful things that she said, even though they're anonymous. And I think that this issue of staying or not staying is something that is going to be part of the church until Jesus comes, because it was part of the church when Jesus started the church. There were people who wrestled with whether they were going to stay or not. And one of the wonderful things about our religion is that we don't believe in hell, and we believe in redemption. We believe in forgiveness. We believe especially in love. And I think that what you said, Curt, about not judging people, Gloria and I have been privileged to minister to a brother in our ward here in Northern California who was out of the church for 20 years, and a really good, honest, thoughtful man who simply wrestled with things that didn't seem they could be reconciled. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were able to sustain him as a new member of the bishopric. So I hope that what we do as we stay is to create that space for people who want to come back, who want to give it another try, to feel there's a home for them. So many people leave because they don't feel accepted, they feel judged. And if we can create that space where love thrives. I say in the conclusion of my own essay, someone said, we're here to walk one another home. I think that's what the function of the church is to help us walk one another home. Home to our true selves, home to the community of which we are a part, and home to the heavenly abode where the promise of pure, abundant, unending love awaits us. I want to be part of that journey. That's as good a reason for staying as I can imagine. All of these are reasons I continue to stay. Together they constitute staying as a conscious and deliberate act of love. Ultimately, I feel that staying in Mormonism is the most loving thing I can do for myself, for my family, for my friends, for others, and for God. I choose to stay for the possibilities and promises of what love can make possible. And so I hope that whatever we do, and I think that message comes through in the range of things. I'm just saying, someone has said, I don't really like the buffet analogy. If you eat everything at the buffet line at any restaurant, it will cost, it will not be good for you. The trick is to choose what your body requires to be at its best. To some extent, that's what we need to do in the church. And I love that, Alan. It's a beautiful thing to say, and it's something like what Carolyn was saying. I'm aware of two kinds of people, those who never send me good news about the church and those who only send me good news about the church. And the fact is, there is both good news and bad news about this thing. And we are called to make this church a greater reflection of the church Jesus would like it to be. And this is why I think this calling is a calling of love, a calling of service, and that let's strive to make it a place where people, whoever they are, whatever stripe, whatever extent they are connected or disconnected from this thing called Mormonism, that when they come, they feel it's a good and safe place to be.
Carolyn, did you want to say anything about answering that question? She's muted. I think.
Not really. I think that Bob has given the best answer that I could. There are so many things in the church. Some bother some people, some bother other people. Vicki and I were just discussing there are different things about the church that bother us. But on the other hand, there are different things that we just absolutely love. And so to some extent, what happens is a function of who you are and what your basic personality is. Some people have lots of tolerance for mistakes, others don't. And I think part of why people stay or leave depends on how much they're upset and how much they understand behind what happens in the church and out of the church for that matter.
I highly recommend Alan's beautiful essay. He's a scientist. He presents a perspective that I really value. It's interesting to me that we seem to think of science and faith as somehow opposed, and yet ultimately science and faith are united, and that God is both a great scientist and a great a creator of the world of faith and faith experiences. And so one of the things I love about Mormonism is that it seems to me in its greatest manifestations, and Joseph Smith's own term about this, in the embracing of all truth wherever it is. And we need to, I think, keep in mind that the church is in evolution, and that we are called as disciples to help it evolve. The church is not yet where it should be. It's not yet, I believe, where Christ calls it to be. And if we stay in the church to work for change, we're more likely to create a space for more people to feel comfortable staying and thriving.
If I could kick in for another second here.
Absolutely.
The goal of both science and religion is to find out truth. And I'm not sure that anybody has ever answered Pilate's question to Jesus, what is truth? And as long as we keep digging away at it, we hope that we'll eventually find out what truth is. Science and theology are just two different ways to do that. Incidentally, somebody told me something the other day that might be well to be shared with this group. It was an addendum to the scriptures. And it says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, after it's through with you.
Well, let me just say a word in closing that I've been intrigued, Alan, by the fact that Jesus didn't answer that question, and I've wondered why he didn't. And I think for two things. I think as he stood before Pilate, he could have said, Pilate, the truth is standing right before you and you don't even acknowledge it. But I think he would have also said, if I answer that question, people will be arguing for 2,000 years what I meant. And when you ask the question, what is truth? It's a question that every person has to ask and every person has to answer. And so that silence, in that silence of not answering that question, Jesus left it up to us to wrestle with that question of truth. But sometimes, as he was standing just before Pilate, the truth is looking right at us and staring us in the face.
Thanks, Bob. Carolyn, did you want to say anything?
Well, to the question that I think you put to me about the question that was read, I found myself kind of startled at even thinking about, what do you do about all those people who are trying to get you to come back to wherever they think orthodoxy ought to be? Because I don't have any of those people. I don't. And I think the only thing that I could offer to somebody who is in the position of being pulled in that direction by people in their lives, in their ward, is simply to focus on being really comfortable with where you are and who you are, and confident about the position that you have chosen to take and the things that you're willing to say. Because I think if people present themselves, now see, I didn't speak a moment ago because I was on mute. And you know, if you let yourself be on mute, then you don't have a voice. But I think when we become sufficiently excited ourselves about what it is that we are doing, you know, like I am so personally excited about this book that Curt mentioned. There's no way in the world that I could present this book or present myself reading from the book without enormous confidence, because I know that my search for Mother God is part of what has to happen to make this organization a more whole, more holy, more loving one. So I just invite us all to get very clear on who we are, and then to be excitedly confident about sharing that. No matter what it is that anybody wants to receive, we know what we're giving, and that will give us a joyful position.
Thank you for sharing that. I think this is a good place to bring this to an end. It's been a wonderful evening. I thank Bob and Carolyn and Jennifer for participating in this. Remember that there are still several other contributors, and I'm glad to hear that we're going to be able to have an opportunity to hear them at Sunstone. But the book is wonderful. Both volumes are wonderful. Bob, you did a great work in getting those in, getting them edited, and we're going to all be the better for it. Highly recommend them. So thank you once again, and thanks for all of you who have participated on mute tonight by being here with us. So we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Curt, very much.